This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop.
Got it.
Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Been a long education.
Yeah, you know, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
Welcome to it, my friends. It is election day here, and I thought I'd point out an election story to you because this is the mindset of so many. The mindset of so many is that, 200 years ago you won a war, or 500 years ago. You know what? You shouldn't be here. You're here illegally. You should leave now. But that's a conversation primarily held in the United States. This notion that the United States should pay reparations to anyone who is of African descent because they had relatives 8 or 9 generations ago, or 10, whatever it's been now, that, were held in slavery at some point. And therefore, generations, 100 years, 200 years later, that their descendants somehow should be paid money by folks that never held slaves, because it was a very small percentage of people that ever did. And somehow we should be, held to that account. That the Black Hills maybe should be returned to the Sioux Nation. The Black Hills of South Dakota should be a sovereign nation and returned with no influence from the United States. And you think that's crazy talk, but that happened in northern Canada. The Northwest Territories and the Yukon were divided into Indian nations. Now, of course, they still take all of the money from the nation of Canada. All of it, and then some. And then thumb their nose at the nation of Canada. That's a discussion for a different day. But it's not a discussion foreign to the United States. And I bring this to your attention on Election Day because I want you to understand there are so many things going on out there that are important that you, until they reach critical mass, you don't even hear about. But there's a movement afoot in the state of Hawaii, and an upcoming election has highlighted the deep disagreement between Native Hawaiians over what the future should look like. For some, it's formal recognition of their community and a changed relationship with the United States. Others believe they're an occupied nation, that the United States is an illegal occupying force in Hawaii. And when they have this movement afoot now, and this is from, of all news sources, this is from the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, lecturing you and I Americans about colonialism. America only ever had one, large holding. It was the Philippines, which we returned to the Philippines, by the way. During a recent rally about the future of Hawaii, United States officials came to the stage, and they figured they'd hear a hostile audience. But speaker after speaker came to the microphone decrying a rigged process and an occupying government with no legitimacy. We do not need you here. This is our country. Get out of our house. Go home. There are a bunch of citizens from Honolulu. Many in the room in the Hawaiian state capital began singing along with a "Be Loyal to Your King," a national anthem from the Hawaiian Kingdom. This was the first in a series of hearings back in 2014 by the U.S. Interior Department about whether it should offer a path to federal recognition of the Native Hawaiian community. Such a path has long been open to Native American groups on the mainland, but not to the descendants of Hawaii's indigenous people. Earlier this year, The Interior Department made it official, publishing a proposed procedures for reestablishing a formal government-to-government relationship. For real. And remember, your president was born in Hawaii. Maybe he believes there should only be 49 states. Maybe he believes that we screwed the Russians on the deal to bail them out of the Crimean War in 1867, and we should give Alaska back to the Russians. Again, maybe we should give the Black Hills of South Dakota to the Sioux Nation. After all, they got shortchanged by the American government 150 years ago. The first ballots to elect delegates to a convention, or AHA, for this purposes, have now gone out in Hawaii. 40 delegates from across the islands will meet in February of this coming year to discuss whether there should be a native Hawaiian government and what it should look like in the 21st century. But not everyone is happy with the AHA. Some in those who would be eligible to vote or become delegates themselves have said they will boycott it. One delegate candidate has already dropped out, calling the AHA not Pano, upright or fair. Federal recognition has been a wish of some activists for decades, but previous attempts to do so in Congress have failed. But one prominent Hawaiian living in Washington has moved this process forward. That, of course, Barack Obama, publicly supporting the last attempt to gain the recognition option through Congress. Like other issues that have been stymied in the polarized legislature, the administration has now decided to take action through executive orders. But for those who see Obama as their best chance, time is running out. His term ends in just over a year. Native American tribal governments are a nation within a nation. Such governments hold their own elections, run police departments, courts, and other internal infrastructure on reservation land. American Indians are citizens of their tribe, the U.S., and the state where they live. You know, the first Hawaiian government was in 1810. Before that, it was not unified. That is, Hawaii as an independent state is newer than the U.S. And one listener says we should give it to Spain if we want to be fair. Whatever. Let's see. Recognition would define Native Hawaiians as a separate political entity, protecting many of the federal programs currently provided to Native Hawaiians, like favorable housing loans, a land trust program, healthcare, education, and cultural gains and grants. It would also allow for an element of economic independence, although one industry that has enriched few Native American tribes, gambling, is banned in Hawaii. All of this is predicated on the idea that the U.S. government is the rightful authority in Hawaii, something a small but increasing number of Hawaiians no longer believe anyway. Williamson Chang, a professor of law at the University of Hawaii, is one of those Hawaiians. He argues under international law, one country can only annex another by treaty, a document which both parties sign. This is how the entire rest of the U.S. was formed: the Louisiana Purchase, the treaties with Native American tribes, the addition of the Republic of Texas. Anything else, including what happened in Hawaii, is an occupation, he says. As if you have nothing else to think about, you know, maybe Hawaii will be a foreign country. And there it is. Something to think about on this election day as they're, beginning that movement in Hawaii. Maybe Puerto Rico can be independent as well. And again, the Black Hills can go back to the Sioux Nation. And why not? Let's just chop it all up. America was never worth a damn anyway. It's Tuesday.
Covering Michigan and the world from his bunker below the bridge. Here is Steve Gruber.
Well, a young man ain't got nothing in the world these days.
All righty then, it's primary day here in the state. I was sitting here fascinating over these Todd Courser emails again. I read from this earlier. Todd Courser, of course, resigned in the early morning hours of September 11th after being dragged down by a sexual affair with a fellow lawmaker in Lansing, Cindy Gamrich. She was thrown out about an hour later. But he keeps claiming there's this extortion plot and that the police have all the truth and the facts. And here in something he wrote in the last couple of days. The report exonerates me, and it needs to be released. It doesn't justify my actions in the underlying relationship, but the release of the information would clarify lies and misstatements repeated around the world. It also will most likely clarify the allegations by men who would not testify and would not be subject themselves to having their testimony put under oath. It was those unsubstantiated allegations that were the basis for the expulsion proceedings. And that's Todd Courser in an email. I think it probably went out to everybody. It probably went out to my good friend Kyle Melinn, the editor of MERS News as well, who joins me on the program. Kyle, welcome aboard.
Hi, Steve. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did get that email. I also got his 20-minute rambling YouTube message he made in his car.
Thankfully, I missed that. That
was a treat.
Well, I'm sure it was, but I've only got so much time in the day. And, and usually when I'm counseling people of that magnitude, I get $250 an hour. So, I would have had to bill him for, the doctor is in, Lucy from Peanuts,
You're a little more than a nickel, though, huh?
Well, absolutely. Well, this is a complicated issue here. He's got some very serious, debilitating issues that I would have to, charge substantially for. All right, so let's break it down. Todd Courser, the funny thing is about these emails and the rambling YouTube messages, which I saw but just didn't care to watch, right? Then he sends this one out. To those of you in the media who want to know when I'm going to be voting, it looks like tomorrow afternoon. Woohoo! It's like, I'm sorry. Is your medication out of whack? Is that insensitive, Kyle?
No, I think that Todd Courser realizes this has become a story that the media just can't stop but continue to cover. It's been a real life drama that has captured our imagination like no other political story could possibly do. And so the fact that Todd Courser is going to the polls and casting a ballot in what could be his last election is kind of one of the closing chapters of this saga. So, unfortunately, there are media out there, as surprising it may be, TV cameras that will probably be following him to the polls.
Don't you think it would be better off if they just totally ignored him? Because here's the thing. You're right. They're going to follow him out there. But here's what gives me the headache about all of this. To those of you in the media who want to know when I'm going to be voting, it looks like tomorrow afternoon. If you want to know what time, please just text me, and I'll let you know when I'm heading out that way. My polling place is in Clifford. Come on. I mean, this guy, he redefines media whore. I'm sorry, but he redefines it, and it wasn't a very flattering term to begin with. This takes it even, believe it or not, a step lower.
But when you've been in the international media, you've been in newspapers in England. He just had an interview with 2020 with his wife. He can call up CNN and get on the airwaves as soon as he wants. There's a certain mentality that comes with that, and I think he realizes his star is setting quickly. And after today, really, I don't know if the phone is going to be blowing up as much. And so, you just take advantage of it when you can. And from our standpoint in the media, we're very happy that he's sending out such things, so we know that he's accessible. And if we want to continue the story more, that he is accessible. So, right. From my standpoint in the media, I'm kind of grateful.
Well, you that's true. You and I both have made plenty of hay out of this story over the past few months. Not as much as some people, you're right, because I don't know why CNN would grant him an interview or international interest, for a flash in the pan. But here's the thing: if he does somehow pull the miracle ending and block a punt and return it for a touchdown and win this thing today, then he's here. Then it just continues. And he's got supporters. Sidney Gamrot has supporters. There's a reason they play the football games. There's a reason they have elections, because surprising things, especially with a field this big, 8 in one and 10 in the other, whatever it is, big groups of people, a horse race, a thundering herd heading for the ballot box, he could win.
Yeah, you're right. Numerically, it's possible. Realistically, it's not possible at all. The only chance that he could possibly have is that, you're right, he's got 11 people in the Republican primary. So let's say 19,000 people go to the polls, which is what Mark Grebner from Practical Political Consultants is saying. So let's say 19,000 people go to the polls, and he could win with, let's say, I don't know, in a split field, maybe 3,000, 4,000 votes, you still got to find those 3,000, 4,000 people who are going to vote for him. And it's just hard to imagine where those votes are going to come from. There's plenty of real good candidates in that Lapeer County district, and maybe you could say, well, all these good candidates are going to split up the vote, but again, who is going to be voting for Todd Courser? Folks are believing that he's been deceiving them. He is not running a traditional campaign at all. It's been based on emails and YouTube videos, not on actually going door to door. He's getting no donation. He's sending no flyers out. It's just not something that's realistic.
All right,
the few polls that have been done have shown him losing pretty substantially.
And before we run, we got about 20 seconds on Cindy Gamrot. What are her chances today?
I think her chances are about 10%. She is actually running a pretty good race. She's going door to door. She's got flyers, and I think that the public in Allegan County has been much more forgiving about her role in this than the voters in Lapeer County is with Todd's role in this.
Fair enough. And then Todd Courser will just vanish, maybe.
Well, you never know. Yeah, you wouldn't want to guess on what Todd Courser's next political move is going to be. That's for sure.
Maybe it's time for a book. Damn, did
that's
I say
a possibility.
That? Oh, Lord, he's going to do it now. Anyhow, all right. Always a pleasure, Kyle.
Hey, thanks, Steve.
There you have it. Kyle Melinn, the editor of MERS News, sorting out the strangeness of Michigan politics.
Keeping you in touch with Michigan and the world.
Why don't we do it in the road?
Well, if you're going to the polls, make sure you do today. Lots of folks skip this election day. Turnout's not much. Maybe in Lapeer and Allegan counties they'll be a little heavier today because we were just discussing. We're going to cover a little bit more of that in a moment. But the big debate is over debates right now with the Republicans after their big fiasco on CNBC last week, where the moderators were, I think Bush League is being kind, actually. But the battle over the format of the Republican debates continues. The campaigns say they want more control over screen graphics, more leverage in determining the number of questions each candidate receives so it's more balanced, and a 2-hour time limit, and they want to include opening and closing statements. Listen to this.
We may not get everything in one big bite, but we're making progress. That's the important thing.
Whatever the rules are, they should keep to them. That's all I think the candidates want. The rules were established, and they lost control over the entire process last time.
I know that Harry Truman couldn't get elected president with explaining the United States of America's health care plan in 30 seconds.
If you have never voted in a Republican primary in your life, you don't get to moderate a Republican primary debate.
We're here in Iowa talking to voters instead of being in D.C. talking about debates. We've had no trouble negotiating with the networks, and my policy remains what it's always been. I'll debate anyone, anytime, anywhere.
There you have it. Carson Bush, Kasich, Cruz, and Carly all weighing in, and it's pretty much that's kind of the mindset. Weighing in now, Bill Ballenger, Inside Michigan Politics. Bill, welcome back to the program.
Glad to be with you.
Let's start with that Republican fiasco. I'm sure you watched that, and then we'll get down to some of the local races. But that was kind of a, I don't know, it was kind of a car wreck, wasn't it?
Well, it was, but, I thought it was intriguing that the candidates all banded together and seemed to support themselves in unanimity against the news media.
I think it might, and I actually think that Reince Priebus, the chair of the Republican National Committee, may have made a mistake because then they, a day or two later, they bailed out on NBC, and the only Spanish-speaking debate that was going to be held, they bailed on it. And I think that's a mistake because I think that gets translated, if you will, to the Hispanic voters that the Republicans don't care about you and they're going to bail on this thing. And the fact of the matter was, as bad as the CNBC moderators were, the entire Republican field won as a result of that fiasco.
Well, I don't think that they probably hurt themselves. I think they did look probably better as a party, and I think there was a backlash by not just the general public, but the news media itself, the other networks, against the way CNBC handled the debate. I think everybody realized this has gone too far. The way the moderators framed the questions really did seem to be unfair, disrespectful, designed to embarrass the candidates, make the Republicans look bad. And I think when the general public sees that sort of thing, it recoils and is sympathetic with the victims. In this case, I think it was the Republicans.
Yeah, there were certainly some cringe-worthy questions during that get-together. But like you said, it makes the party as a whole look better because they band together. And you talk about talking to your base. Let's be honest, the Republican base dislikes the mainstream media to begin with. They don't trust them, and so that just reinforces their beliefs to begin with.
Yeah, I think that's true. I just think the Republican Party better be careful they don't let this go on too long, because then, with so much time between now and the Iowa caucuses and the contest beyond, it's going to look like the Republicans are maybe making too much of this, and they're trying to milk it, and they really are crybabies and whiners, and they just have got to realize they've got to grow up and face the music and answer tough questions, but make sure that the debates are carried on in a fair manner. And I think if there are things that they've done at this point that look like it could hurt them, like the canceling of the only Spanish language debate apparently they would have had up to this point, they've got to try and rectify that and maybe give that network or some other Spanish language instrument an opportunity for its chance to play in the ring in presidential debate politics. I mean, otherwise it could really boomerang and embarrass and hurt the Republicans.
Yeah, maybe you could have Jorge Ramos from Univision moderate a debate.
Yeah, that might do it in one fell swoop, yeah.
Yeah, that might be fun to watch, actually. All right, so since then, Rubio's numbers skyrocketing in New Hampshire. Ted Cruz doing well, moves into third in Iowa. So those two did well as a result of their responses during that debate. All right. So let's bring it a bit closer to home now. We've talked about this a little bit today, but you're talking about candidates not trying to embarrass themselves. It seems that Todd Courser has no qualms with embarrassing himself whenever possible and trotting out, plots and dark alleys and, conspiracy theories and so forth. Anyhow, the Courser-Gamrat affair, if you will, should finally come to a close today, at least if the polling is accurate at all.
Yes, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen, but it looks like other candidates in the 80th and 82nd districts, that's Allegan County and Lapeer County State House districts, are more likely to win than either Todd Courser or Cindy Gamrat.
Yeah, and according to some, there'll be, 20,000 people will turn out to vote in those places, from what we understand. I guess, it's still... because the field is so big, Courser's race is 11 people. I think Gamrat has 8 or 9, whatever it is. I mean, you could win with 10 or 15% of the vote if it broke that way, couldn't you?
Yeah, 10 or 15 is maybe a little too low. I think, you'd probably have to expect at least 20% of the vote to win by a plurality if you were Courser and Gamrat. And I think that's going to be pretty hard for them to achieve. I'm not sure how badly they're going to do. I mean, out of 8 candidates in one case and 11 candidates in the other, I doubt if you're going to see them bringing up the rear. I think they have their solid cadre of supporters who are going to be sympathetic with them to a certain extent, and they're going to be resentful that it does look to a certain segment of people as though the establishment ganged up on Courser and Gamrat, and they're going to play that card. So I think there is a nucleus of support for them, but I just don't think it's enough for them to win in either case.
Right.
I expect they're going to be third or fourth in each case. That would be my guess, but I think it's going to be pretty close.
We'll keep an eye on it. Then, of course, the circus will conclude either way, whether they're participating at that point or not, on March the 8th here in Michigan, which is the day that, of course, is primary day here in Michigan. And no matter what happens, whoever comes out today, they'll finish it up on March the 8th.
Correct. Yeah, that's the general election. This is just the primary, although in all these cases, and by the way, there is a third race that people just don't pay any attention to. Over in Grand Rapids, in the 75th State House District, there's a vacancy in a heavily Democratic district because of the resignation earlier in the year by Brandon Dillon to become the Democratic state chairman. So they're trying to fill his seat. That's happening today, too. And all three of the general elections is going to be on March 8th. So whoever wins the Democratic primary in the 75th today in Grand Rapids, whoever wins the Republican primary in the 80th and 82nd today are almost certainly going to be elected on March 8th.
Bill Ballenger, always a pleasure from Inside Michigan Politics. Thank you, my friend.
My pleasure.
It's Tuesday on the Steve Gruber Show.
The Steve Gruber Show, American Values with Midwestern Common Sense.
All right, if you'd like to get involved with the program, we encourage that, of course. The Common Sense hotline is 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966 is the Common Sense hotline for you to get involved. You can also find out more at stevegruber.com. There is a listen live option there. Click that button, take us to work. And you can also hear past programs and select specific guests as well. All part of our podcast, powered by Podbean. You can check all of that out. And, well, it's all there for you. That's what stevegruber.com is there for you. All the guests, all the columns, all of it. And it's absolutely free of charge. What a bargain, what a deal. Katie Tubb is our next guest, a research assistant at the Thomas A. Rowe Institute for Economic Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation. And we have been talking, well, for a long time about climate change and the Clean Power Plan and so on and so forth, and how it's going to affect us right here in the Midwest, which is pretty substantially, potentially. And there's all sorts of unintended consequences, I suppose. Katie Tubb, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Well, glad to have you here. Obviously, these are things that, that we deal with all the time. My concern on the front end of all of this is having unelected bureaucrats at the EPA and other federal agencies basically create law, enforce law, and prosecute violators, all unelected officials basically creating rules and regulations that have not been passed by my representatives. And it's all part of this big bureaucracy of government. The EPA has, they have armed agents that can come to your house with, a 45 on their hip and a badge and arrest you if they don't like the way you've behaved. I suppose that could be true if you violate climate change or you violate the Clean Power Plan. I mean, all sorts of problems out there. But at the end of the day, what does the Clean Power Plan really do for us anyway?
That is an excellent question. And to get to your tagline about common sense, it doesn't do a whole lot, which is far from the common sense solution to global warming if you think that's a problem.
Well, okay, because here's the thing. I know, for example, I don't know where you call home, but here in Michigan, we have a lot of these outside wood burners that heat water and heat people's homes. Or, they're wood furnaces, but they sit outside. And when you burn wood, I know this is shocking, Katie, it creates smoke, okay? Which is stunning, and campfires do the same thing. So making s'mores is probably dangerous and deadly to our children as well.
Right.
But the problem is that based on the new ozone regulations and the Clean Power Plan and all of these new regulations that are out there, not only are we shutting down coal-fired power plants and so forth, but a lot of this ground-level ozone, the particulate matter will be too high, meaning that national parks in the United States will be non-compliant, apparently, from all of these things. And I get confused as which rule is which, but it's this gobbledygook of government regulation and oversight and overreach, I would say. And
and I'd say you are not alone in being confused, because state regulators whose job it is to manage all these regulations have testified in Congress that they're equally as confused. So, you're not alone, Steve, in just the massive regulation.
See, and I can hear right there, Katie, that the police are coming to get you just because you're speaking out on the subject. I mean, you are violating the law.
I am a block from the Capitol, so Steve, they might actually be coming for Congress.
Well, those criminals ought to be arrested, But here's the thing. Regardless of what you think about the Clean Power Plan or the plan, how it addresses global warming or whether it works or not, at the end of the day, the problem for me is the structure of our government, the separation of powers, the fact that I'm not being represented by the EPA or the USDA or the FCC or any other of the damn alphabet soup crew. and I'm paying a price, and I'm being held to account by rules and regulations that have never been approved by the Congress. And that's where I have a big disconnect.
Absolutely, and I think that Congress is starting to wake up to this. Whether they actually get something across the finish line remains to be seen, because we've seen Congress talk big and act small. But I'm encouraged with what both the House and the Senate are doing as far as the Clean Power Plan. They're advancing a couple different vehicles of legislation to at least voice their disapproval, if not totally kill the regulation. And, of course, Obama will veto everything because this is one of his legacy issues. But I think it's really important that Congress draws a line for the next administration.
All right, and here's something hot off the presses. Katie Tubb is with the Heritage Foundation. NASA has just published a new study showing that Antarctica's ice sheet has, in fact, been thickening and enlarging for at least 1,000 years. From extra snowfall in the North and the South Pole actually increased in mass dramatically from 1992 until 2008. That, according to NASA, during all these global warming years. NASA researchers found the mass gains in Antarctica mean the South Pole is not, I repeat, contributing to any alleged global sea level rise. In fact, scientists don't expect Antarctica to contribute to sea level rise for at least 30 years. You see, Antarctica is getting larger. You tell people this, well, that's different. The Arctic glaciers are disappearing, and it's different. Was Chicken Little right or wrong, Katie?
Well, I think your point there illustrates a bigger problem with this whole conversation is there's a lot of science being ignored or just rejected as, fill in some name-calling adjective in there, and it doesn't fit the narrative that Obama and the UN want to drive. And, the Antarctic ice is a great example, but it gets called different, or, that's just another example of extreme weather that proves, global warming is a problem.
Let me just say this in closing. Today in southern Michigan on November the 3rd? Whatever day today is. It'll be 73 degrees and sunny. Global warming making Michigan a better place to live every year. Thank God. Katie Tubb, thank you. What is the perfect temperature? I like to ask global warmists that. They don't have an answer. They sit there and their mouth flies open. Well, that's different. What's the perfect temperature we're trying to achieve? Anyhow, Katie Tubb, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, Katie Tubb, Research Assistant at the Thomas A. Rowe Institute for Economic Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation, found only on the Steve Gruber Show today for your listening pleasure.